Hi, everyone. Today, we're diving into something we hear a lot of MSPs asking about. How can I automate my documentation in Hudu? Or even how can I reduce the manual overhead that comes with maintaining documentation? If you've ever wished you could automate asset updates, dynamically manage KB articles, or reduce repetitive admin tasks, this video is for you. We'll walk through real-world automation examples using N8N, an open source self-hosted automation platform, and the Hudu community node, built specifically to make a lot of this possible. Our goal today is to give you a working knowledge of what's possible. This is not a full N8N training course, but we'll point you to helpful resources and link them in the description if you're just getting started. Now, before we dive in, let's quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Jordan Hart, product manager here at Hudu. Over the past few years, I've worked closely with MSPs to improve their documentation practices, and time and again, automation is where we see MSPs getting a ton of value. And I'm joined today by Max from Intellect IT. Max is not only a longtime Hudu user, but also the developer of the N8N Hudu community node that we'll be showing off today. Max, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this space?
Hi, Jordan. Yeah, thanks for having me. We've had a long-term journey, first of all, finding Hudu as a platform. So we've come from a less smooth platforms that we've used over the years, and then in the last probably 3 to 4 years, we've migrated onto Hudu and enjoyed every moment of it. Over the last probably 5 to 8 years, we've struggled with having sufficiently deep and wide integrations across the platforms that we use, Hudu, so knowledge-based management, as well as the RMM and PSA systems. So, and as a result, in the last year, we've made a conscious effort to migrate to a what we feel is a very suitable workflow automation platform, N8N, and decided found that there's been no connector for Hudu platform. So, late last year, decided to write it and have expanding it ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, super cool to hear. Excited to jump into the demonstrations today. Before we do dive in, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes for the call. This session is focused on what's possible with Hudu automation and N8N. It is not intended to be a full N8N course, but again, we'll link you to resources that can be helpful. All demonstrations and recommendations today come from our experiences. This includes third-party community tools, which means always test in your environment before rolling anything out into production. So here's what we'll cover today. An intro to how N8N works and practical Hudu automation examples, why automation makes a huge difference for MSPs, especially for saving time, improving consistency, and reducing human error. And hopefully, by the end of it, our goal is that you walk away with a working knowledge of what's possible using the N8N Hudu community node. Max, anything you'd like to add there?
No, that covers it quite well. So I'm very, very excited about the possibilities. So that it is can be compared almost as a invention of internet, as I'd say. The possibilities for MSPs, and not just MSPs, because I know Hudu is quite often also used as an internal knowledge-based system by internal IT departments. Now, that can greatly benefit from these automations as well.
Yeah, it's a big comparison, but I wholeheartedly agree. It's a neat product and the things you can do with it. So starting off, giving some N8N context and maybe why you chose N8N. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with N8N and Hudu and what started it?
Yeah, so over the last, or close to a decade, what we've been finding is automation, so integration and automation's been key to ensuring efficiency and quality of our output. So close to probably about a decade ago now, we've landed on a product called It Does It, which was essentially a Zapier-like Chicago-based organization which put out workflow automation. That was one of the very few workflow automation platforms which had a connectivity or connectors to Autotask, so our ticketing system, and our PSA, and amongst others. And so we started mapping out various workflows in it up until lovely friends at QuickBooks have purchased it, swallowed it up, took it off the market. Within 6 months, the product was gone. And so our search recommenced, and then we've looked at platforms between Zapier, Boomi, Flow, Power Automate now, Logic Apps, Integromat/Make, Windmill, AppyPie, FlowGear, and across all of them, what we found, they either don't have native connectors for Autotask, or if they do, like say with Zapier's as a good example, it will support some of the connectors to some of the systems we need, but will support 5% of the functionality, or it's going to be very, very basic. So here then you end up hitting brick walls because the underlying connectors is very, very limited. So then over the last, came across N8N probably about 2 or 3 years ago, as the platform was maturing up, and we were trying to avoid sort of building connectors for these platforms, hoping that there'll be a platform where the necessary connectors to so RMM systems, knowledge-based management systems, will already exist. However, there were a few which did have partial connectors, but they were quite prohibitively expensive to run. So they typically aimed for sort of enterprise market. Anyway, so mid last year we've picked back up relooked at N8N connector or N8N platform again, and started to, and the temptation for, and so the knowledge base or reasonably good documentation on process that's necessary to start developing or writing your own connectors or your own nodes in N8N speak for applications. And about mid to the end of last year, sort of thought, well, we've compiled a long list of all of the platforms that we've got, so from RMMs, from so RMM, PSA, and various others, and thought, Hudu would be our first cab off the rank, so to say. So reasonably quickly developed the baseline or the minimum functionality, and we're quite impressed with how flexible it is, how flexible working within N8N it is, as well as their overall community. So for the context, within N8N platform or ecosystem, there seems to be a connector being written or published anything from an hour through to maybe 4 a day, but there's just a consistent flow. And it's not to say there's a lot of those are individuals who are trialing and testing, so the quality of the connectors may not be up there, or so this quality versus quantity, there's definitely a something to be aware of there. However, it's still an ecosystem that's it's very active, very invested, it's very accessible, and if you like, I can start diving into the specific resources in terms of for someone who's just heard about N8N and where to go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, start showing those off, we'll also link them in the description. That way you have direct links to any of those resources that Max shows off.
Perfect. All right, so I'll just share my screen. So Overall, so N8N as a platform is it's a pseudo open source project. It is available in I'd say 2 official and a third, so let's call it semi-official way of being hosted or being executed. So one is the native self-hosted process, which is the primary one that we'll be talking here. So under that scenario, you'll be hosting that yourself. It's the most easiest ways to host it is on Docker, but we'll cover that later on. And under that scenario, you'll be running to start with the community edition of N8N, which doesn't have fully featured except for some of the enterprise features that you'll be able to find on N8N's website, which will provide you a comparison between so community and enterprise versions. The second way of hosting it would be using it would be to use the hosted version. So i.e. N8N, like Zapier and others, do offer a cloud-hosted version of it. But there is one gotcha with it, is that community nodes, they're only starting now to support a usage of community nodes in their hosted version, primarily because of security. So they need to vet the quality of the code that comes through before they can allow that to run in their platform. So as that expands, no doubt they'll work out a mechanism of being able to support most community nodes onto it. But so that's just something to be aware of. And then there's a third means, which would be something I suggest to consider for the individuals that don't have a great deal of self-hosted experience, and that is a number of I guess veterans in the N8N communities there's a handful that have started a pseudo specialized hosting systems where they'll give you a VPS or essentially a hosted environment relatively cost effective, and they'll host your community edition of N8N for you for a monthly fee. So you'll get access to your own, essentially a Linux, own Linux box with a front end that will makes it easy for you to start up your instance with your full-fledged N8N deployed, and then you can start deploying all of the N8N connectors into it and making use of it.
Awesome. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they do offer a 30-day free trial on the hosted. That's what I use to get up and running with it. So definitely check that out. In terms of the self-hosted, like we're going to be covering, though, I am no Docker wizard, but their guides are pretty straightforward, and it was pretty easy to get spun up. So.
Yeah, so as far as the resources within the N8N, so n8n.io is the main website. I'd suggest familiarize yourself with it. It goes through a significant amount of examples of possibilities, and so that's the first resource that I'd be suggesting. From a hosting perspective, the docs.n8n.io are quite thorough, quite detailed. They're mostly up to date, and there's a specific section around self-hosting, which will run you through the installation guides. It'll run you through all the way through to securing it, and there's even things like starter kits. So if you want to be able to make use of or trial all of the capabilities within the self-hosted environment, they make a Docker container available, which includes N8N, Alarma, Quadrant, PostgreSQL. So it allows you to, depending on your hardware, can run local LLMs on it, and you make use of the AI capabilities or AI agent capabilities that are built into the platform.
Awesome.
One other resource that I've suggested is the N8N communities. So there's a Discord as well as the the traditional forums. It is a quite a useful resource, particularly for repetitive or being able to ask questions or see if there's a historical that particular challenge that you've come across has been asked in the past. And that's so that this will documentation. So first and foremost, I'll be suggesting start with docs.n8n.io. That will walk you through not only the installation, which is sort of that section there. It will run you through some concepts in terms of the moving parts within the underlying ecosystem, all the way through to scaling. So in an example, the system is designed to be able to run hundreds of automations concurrently, so it does have a quite a big scaling capability, and all the way through to that this particular N8N as a platform is quite often used as the back end for powering websites or even web applications. So there are quite a few so B2B, B2C applications that are at the back end actually just nothing more than a series of N8N workflows.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Yeah, definitely check out those guides. It's pretty straightforward to get up and running. Just a quick recap of kind of why you chose it though. So it sounds like ease of use, flexibility of the platform, the community buy-in and the support that you get with the community, and then obviously the ability to self-host and cost associated with it.
Yeah, spot on, and being able to have expandability on it. So that's got you're on one hand utilizing a SaaS or SaaS-like platform, but on the other, it gives you an immense amount of flexibility in being able to address some of the quirks and the integrations that typically other platforms don't allow you, or you with others you may get 90% there, and that 10% is going to be absolutely painful or absolutely impossible to do. So it allows you to overcome it.
Yeah, makes sense. Perfect. So Max, do you want to kind of get us started with installing and using the kind of built-in nodes as well as installing the Hudu community node?
Yeah. So once you have your N8N deployed, one of the things you'll find, so the underlying N8N will have about, I think they're sitting at around 500 or so nodes that are built in. So this is sort of the list of them, as well as there's an ever-growing list of community nodes that are being distributed. So all of the community nodes is hosted on pmjs.com. You'll find all of them are going to be tagged with an N8N community node package. So doing a quick search now, you can see that, and by the way, from a naming conventions of nodes, they'll follow one of two standards. They'll either be prefixed with N8N nodes and then a node name, or author / and then the same logic. So they're the two typical standards that are followed. So when you do see them, this is how to identify them. And what you'll find is in terms of volume, so this is what I was referring to earlier, so the active engagement within the community is you'll see this nodes or these connectors being published by individuals, anything from a minute ago, an hour ago, 2 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. So you can see this active drip feeding of connectors, and there's literally thousands of them. So one thing I will mention, the N8N nodes that are published that are built in, they have gone through validation and quite often are supported either by N8N themselves or the organization or authorized vendor or author of it. The community nodes, on the other hand, they are written by individuals, or in some cases organizations, but they haven't gone independent testing. So it's very important to sanity check if you're installing the community nodes. Check for how reputable it is, how much installation, or what's the installs base. So for example, this one has not been deployed at all, has not had any downloads. This one has already been over 1,000 downloads. So looking at how the versions, how old it is, and so forth, and then particularly if you deploy into sensitive environments, get the code of that particular connector just checked, just so that it aligns with the packaging that's on the label. Make sure that there's no backdoors, and that it's not doing anything malicious. So that's the security disclaimer. Then once you've deployed your N8N and you want to install, as an example, the Hudu community node, all you'll be doing is going to settings, community nodes, and so this will actually list out all the community nodes that we've got deployed. So hit install. Here you'll put in just the name of the community node, or the package name. This is what I was talking about earlier, this portion here, as an example. You acknowledge the risks of installing unverified code. So this is my point earlier. Install it, and this will download that package of npm, deploy it to your local instance, and it will be made available, be presented in that actual to be used within the workflows. One of the things you'll find is the any lifecycle management. So, i.e., for example, if we make updates to the Hudu node, when you and publish those as a new release, what you'll find is when you go to the community nodes section here, is that this will flag that there's an update available. So I'm looking at it now, all of our connectors are up to date. So so from a keeping it up to date, it makes it a very straightforward process. So that's sort of one of the other ways that how N8N have structured that the community node contribution is the easiest way to deploy community nodes is through the web interface, but that does mean that the person needs to make it available to the community. So that's kind of it builds to support the ecosystem. So under that scenario. So yeah, once you've deployed the nodes, so in this particular case, you've deployed N8N Hudu. So at the moment, this particular node is sitting at 1.4.2 is the version. Then you'll be able to start making use of it in your workflows.
Perfect. Thanks, Max. And just a quick reminder, if you are on that hosted version of N8N, I don't believe you'll see that community nodes. I think there are maybe a few community nodes that you can go ahead and install, but those, like Max said, have to be verified by N8N. So you would not be able to install the Hudu community node.
Not now anyway. It may change in the future, but yes.
Perfect. So yeah, Max, you want to jump into the actual community node itself and show the viewers a little bit of what it can do and how to use it?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just share up my screen. So once you've installed it, you'll start with you'll be building out a workflow. So in my particular case, I'll add a trigger. So in N8N, you can have numerous triggers, and in some of them you can have multiples of those triggers. So schedules, manual, webhooks from applications. So on app events, you can do so on chat submissions. I think there's even FTP and mail, and so there's an enormous way of how workflows can be triggered. So for the moment, just to keep it simple, so we'll set up a manual trigger, and from then on, then you build out what you want to do within your workflow. So in this particular case, what I want to do is I will pull up the Hudu community node. So just on as far as the intros and the validation of node that I mentioned earlier about security and trustworthiness, whenever you use any of the nodes in your little pane here on the right hand side, you'll see excuse me, you'll see just the names that don't have any icons. All of those are built-in nodes that are published by N8N themselves. Then you'll see certain nodes which has a little tick box, which is maintained by a particular vendor, so officially. And then you'll have a little box over here which designates this is a community node that you've deployed. So in our case, for example, we've got Autotask community node, and down here we've got our Hudu, community node. So that's the way to differentiate which one's which. And then beyond that, there's also different type of nodes. So you'll see some nodes which are let's call it less featured, less customized, I guess. And those ones you'll have a little designation, which is a HTTP request, as an example. So think of it as a light node for that N8N ship that may not be as feature rich. Anyway, so once you've deployed your Hudu community node, what you'll see is it's broken up into, so what you can do with it, the functionality is broken up into the types of areas that you'll be working within within Hudu, within your Hudu instance. So, and that is, so anything to do with, say, articles, assets, and it's pretty much, it's a quite an extensive list of pretty much most things that you can do with, through API. So to get going, pick anything in this list, so it doesn't really matter. So that will add this node into your workflow. And the underlying structure, how it's what you'll first see is in your credential view, there'll be no credentials added in here. So then you'll need to create new credentials. You need to put in your Hudu instance. So this is your URL that you go to. So in our particular case, so in this instance, it will be this portion here, which is the that you'll be putting in, and you'll be putting in the API key. So this is obtained through this section here. So you'll hit the new API key, give it a recommendation. Be very, very be as detailed as possible so that you can differentiate your keys, and then also lock down or secure your usage of the API key. So for example, if you're self-hosting your N8N instance and that's sitting behind a static public IP, then pin this API key just to that public IP, so it cannot be used from others. Equally, so consider splitting your different API keys if you do have different, I guess, depths of workflows. Some may be read-only, or some may actually do deletions or exporting of data. So so just something to watch out for.
So scope the API key specific to each workflow that you're doing.
Well, yes, or that does need to be a balance, so that you are not, you don't end up having 100 different API keys that are very difficult to keep track of. But the idea is trying to lock it down as practically as tight as possible. Now, within N8N, any credentials that you add into your instance, they're not stored with the workflow. So your workflow all merely will do, it will reference that this particular node utilizes this credential set. That credential set sits elsewhere within your N8N database, so encrypted and so forth, so that if, for example, you are exporting or sharing your workflow with others, the only thing that that's going to be revealing to that party is just that name, your credential label this part here is what they'll see in it. So yeah, once you've set out the credentials, well, then you work through what is the area of Hudu that you want to work with, followed by what is the operation or the action you want to execute against that area. And then following on, that there'll be inputs and filtering parameters and so forth. And that is a very much a standard way of working with any node within N8N. Jordan, incidentally, as you were getting up to speed with working with nodes, was it fairly intuitive, the hierarchical approach of sort of resource operation, that concept? Did you find that fairly easy to get up to speed on?
It was, yeah, absolutely. I think, just a quick struggle was realizing that the list view that you see when you're kind of grabbing an action or a resource is the same as you're seeing once you actually open up the node. You can kind of switch from both. So I choose article. I could choose article from the list and have a bunch of these actions. I could do that from just instead of choosing any of them, choosing the right resource, and then I have different operations as well. But I mean, other than the 10-second confusion on what the difference was, yeah, very straightforward on how to use those.
Yeah, and I think that is an evolving approach, because so in the past when you were adding a node, so in this say pick a node, you used to be able to search the underlying actions. However, I think so the purpose of this list is purely just to be able to tell you this is the entire capabilities of what this node has to offer, and the fact that, for example, I may choose to do a get many relations in this particular case, I can easily then from then on change it once that node has been added to your workplace or to the workflow. So I typically just pick whatever the top one of the type in your Hudu, pick whichever the first action that you see, and then from then on massage the particular resource. So this particular,
choose a resource, and then you can do actions associated with that resource. And this is pretty much a one-to-one with Hudu's API then?
Correct. Yeah. So there's most of capabilities. They're very, very close as far as the relationship between the resource and what's available in the API. So maybe I'll deep dive into the capabilities of what's available in the Hudu node. And then just walk through some of the specific examples.
Perfect.
So overall, the way it's published, quite often you'll be working with, or most of the time you'll be working with articles, assets, say companies, and probably it. I think they're the most frequent endpoints that you'll be hitting. All of the other ones that tend to be sort of supporting. So if I run through, and what you'll find is when you pick a resource, depending on the resource type, it will list out all the actions that you can do for that resource. So for example, if we get activity log as an example, there's not much you can do with an activity log. So either get many or delete operations. Within articles, however, there's a lot more operations that you can do. Now, some of those operations are native operations that are aligned with native capabilities of the API. So as an example, so get many, get many operation for for articles, but we've also have added a hybrid operation where we found for getting, in this particular case, article history. So that article history is, as an example, is available, or it's available through the UI when you navigate through the articles, but where it sits in the API is in a slightly different spot. So we essentially built let's call it a custom operation, which is able to give us the here's an example history of this specific article, history of based off when it was revised, and what was the version at that point in time, which is can be quite useful. So that you'll find that there's some hybrid operations that exist within the N8N node. All of the operations, and this is consistent to N8N in general, will have either filtering capabilities, and those filters are based off, will vary what's in this list depending on what resource you're working with. So, example, there may be, I want to be able to filter articles only by a specific company. So in which case I'll pick, say a company that may be in this list, and execute and just get just those ones. These filters can be stacked. So in this particular case, I can put, say name and utilize any of these essential fields as and sort of queried stacked filters.
That's really cool. I actually did not play around with the filters very much, so that's really neat. And I'm assuming company name, no company, you're hitting the central KB then.
Yeah, correct. So if there's no, correct. If no company, it grabs it across all of them. So one thing you'll also find is you want to be when you're particularly fetching lots of items from the API, you want to be mindful if you are going to be limiting your retrieval to X number of items or all, as an example. So one of the things that you'll find, depending on what type of endpoint that you're getting, for example, you may have assets, your asset list within the overall organization may be actually quite extensive. So you may have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. So just be very careful to be as tight as possible in any of the queries that you do. One endpoint that particularly needs a little bit more care is the activity log. So and this has sort of added a bit of a warning on it, is that in your activity log, most people, particularly that have been on Hudu for quite some time, will have an enormous amount of records in it. So, do not try and do return all in your activity log, because you'll be sitting there for a very long time. So we've covered so working with resources in a read-only operation. So that is so fetching, you're either fetching many or fetching just one. So if we, for example, fetching a list of assets, or you can just fetch a single asset, and that always with all nodes, or in most cases, when you're fetching a single asset, it's always going to be get by ID. So get the ID, which is the unique identifier in the backend table, which gives you that single row, and of all the attributes that are available for it.
So you could use the API to get that ID, or you could use that get many, filter it down so you're not getting tons of results, grab that ID, now you can run that get on that specific and actually work with it.
Yes, correct, spot on. So it's quite often where you find the name of the asset that you were working with, the UI name. So in which case you may just filter it down to that name. So it will give you that single ID. And then from then on, if you want to build in a subsequent flow that, okay, now I've retrieved, I don't know, this particular asset, and then I want to be able to maybe update it or maybe do some other workflows, that's your typical logic. You'd either, ID, get by ID, or if you know other attributes that are unique to it, or most likely, or let's say slug, for example, as a really good example of that is easy to retrieve from the UI, because it is available in your URL. So it's this field, that field there. So then, you take that field, go through to like that, and there you go. Here's my asset. So and then you stack your workflow. Then on top of the read operations, there are write or archive or delete operations that are available. So again, be very, very careful, particularly when you're working with doing any forms of mass updates, because it is very easy for you to screw up all of your, for example, assets and knowledge base articles, because there is no undo and there's no 15 different stacked confirmation boxes that you'll see in here. Once you've set up your workflow, and if you are doing for example, get many with returning all assets with no filtering, that will return to you. So in this instance, I've got only 20 assets, but you may have 100,000, and then from then on, you decide that you want to do a asset deletion and link it to, so essentially for every discovered asset, run it through the next action, which would be asset delete, and execute this. It will delete all your assets. So the one that comes through, or whatever the aspect. So just be very, very careful in structuring your workflows.
And that kind of brings back to your point of scoping that API key. If you're not going to need deletion capabilities, possibly at least that prevents you from possibly hitting that asset delete if that's not going to be built within your workflow.
Exactly. So if we then moving on with one of the things that you'll find within the node. So we've tried to focus in structuring, we try to focus on usability as much as possible. So we feel if working within that connector is as frictionless as possible, it's more likely to be used, it's more likely to have a more richer workflow, so you can steer that energy into making your workflow more advanced rather than fighting with the underlying connector. So what you'll find is there'll be certain fields in there which are dynamic. So as an example, if we're doing get many asset operations, and this will give you an active list of your companies that are in your N8N, or in your Hudu, in your Hudu. There's other connectors, for example, or other fields which are also dynamic. So for example, if I'm fetching assets and I want to get assets for all companies, however, I'm only interested in assets which are using a specific layout type. So that would be, say, computer assets as an example. This list of assets also comes from your API. So this is what I have configured in my instance. Then I can retrieve, and there you go. So I'm retrieving, I've got 20 of those assets. However, if I want to get the applications updated assets, types of assets, that instance doesn't have any, so it doesn't return me any assets. So that you can kind of filter based on the type of layout, for example, you're using. And again, that's using a dynamic, so dynamic pick list. One of the things you'll also find in all of majority of the fields where you see this little toggle, so either fixed or expression. So when you start getting into moderate to advanced level of working with N8N, this becomes extremely powerful. And I'll show you in later examples on where the practical use cases of it. But if you flick to expression, this allows you to have a JavaScript or either a fixed string or a JavaScript expression that you can build out that can be quite extensive. And so you can do, it all of a sudden just becomes significantly more powerful in what you can do and how standardized you can build your workflow, based on sort of incoming data or date, time, or any other attributes. So I'll quickly just run through a couple of more resource types. We've built out one of, so you'll be typically working with assets. As an example, assets will have, there's a associated aspect, which is asset layouts, that is made up of, that includes asset fields. So quite often you'll see in the UI, when you are working with a asset layout, all of these fields, all of them have an extensive set of configuration attributes. Now, access to that those configuration attributes, we've put into the asset layout field resource, which is then linked to whichever asset layout that you're working with. So in this particular case, here's all of the fields that you saw that are listed under the computer assets. All of them are available to be worked through with via asset layout field. And you can update them, you can add them, you can create these fields within this asset layout. So just something to be aware of, that there is a multi-dimensional or multi-level relationship between some of these resources and how they work. Any other, Jordan, any other resources you think might be worthwhile doing a quick deep dive on?
That's those are probably the most common. I could see Magic Dash potentially being a pretty heavily utilized one. That's a pretty popular feature in Hudu, but
yeah. So interestingly, you mentioned that. So I've been playing around with making a better use of it, because as a feature, Magic Dash is only available via API. So it's an integration feature as opposed to a user front end feature. So actually have been doing a little bit more testing, and a little bit more work with Magic Dash. So hopefully, as we build some workflows that do utilize it, we'll make sure to publish it onto the Hudu community.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Max, for showing that off. Would you mind showing us, if we're going to take this community node and now we want to do something with it, would you mind showing us an example that somebody maybe just getting started with N8N could actually use in their environment and set up?
Yeah, no, of course. So an example that we've built out, that I've built, this is a conceptual workflow that will allow us to make mass updates to, in this particular assets in your Hudu instance, and that will sort of introduce some concepts on working with individual nodes. So I'll step you guys through it. So we have what we're trying to do. So the objective is we have a company. So in this particular case, Australia Post, and they have a number of assets. Now, these assets, there's been a mistake, and the computer names have actually had either been incorrectly imported, or there's some sort of this prefix, for example, is actually incorrect. So the suffix is correct, the prefix is wrong. So rather than individually making the updates on those, you can do this through this workflow. So in this particular workflow, I've set it up as to be executed manually. So it's for essentially once-off cleanup. And what we'll be doing is we'll be retrieving. We'll be working with assets using get many operation, filtering it down to a specific company, and we'll be returning all. So once that's received, then we'll be looping for every record that is retrieved from here. We'll be looping and making a couple of individual operations. Now, one thing that you'll find, irrespective if you had experience working with Flow or Power Automate or the Zapier or any others, some of the N8N does have it does work a little bit differently, particularly with multiple items, and this is sort of a nuance that you learn, particularly as you work with data transformation and looping, for example. So all of these sort of actions is that if your operation is simple and all you want to do is you want to retrieve a bunch of assets in this case and then make a single action to each of the assets that has come through, then there's no need for looping. So because what N8N will do, it will get 20 records. That 20 records will be retrieved by this node, will be passed on to the next node. If the next node doesn't have a multi-stepped, if you don't need to do multiple steps in it, in that particular activity. So for example, if all I want to do is I want to do an update. So if I want to do asset update, and I want to make a minor tweak to the incoming asset, then you don't need to do any forms of looping, because what the action will do, it will give you 20 records and then it will drop a record at a time to the next node, and that action will be carried out to each node. So and the dynamic fields will apply. So in my case, however, I want to be a little bit more, I want to do a few more changes to it. So I do need to loop through each one of those assets. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to redefine the prefix. So, and I'm using, in this particular case, the built-in node, which is used for, built-in node called set, or edit fields, which is used for manipulating variables or building variables that are used in subsequent workflows. So in this particular case, I'm doing a manual mapping. I've created I'm creating a new field called name suffix, just to extract that second part of the computer name. I'm using JavaScript to which is that JavaScript function in to extract, to do a split using the hyphen and retrieve the second element after that hyphen. And I'm also creating in the same node a variable called new prefix, which is so Max's client, let's call it, with a hyphen. Then, so you can ignore that for the moment, this node. So I've disabled it, hence it's gray. And then once this has been defined in this node, I'm going to be updating that asset with a new asset name. So you'll see that in here, I'm not referencing a fixed ID, or I'm fixing a dynamic. And the dynamic, what this does, this is a reference to the previous step, which is this one here. So a record, an item that comes from there, and I'm retrieving just the ID from that item. So that gives me that dynamic for each ID. Go and do this. And in this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm updating that name. And again, I'm getting the prefix. I'm the two variables. for incoming item that we've received at the start of the loop that we've split into two parts. And we've taken the suffix and the new prefix. And all we're doing is we're recompiling it and taking, this is the new prefix, Max's client that I've defined, and the suffix that we've extracted from there so I'm essentially reconstructing that name and executing the update. So if we were to, so current computer names are laid out like so. If we were to execute this workflow and run through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, what you'll see is these guys here have been renamed accordingly. So, and then you'll see as you start working through it, you'll be able to get a better feel for how to debug your workflows. But you'll see you've got so an action's come through, 20 items has come through. We've looped through 20 of those items. We've set for each one of the variables. We've set it so you can see here's all of our items that have come through. So you can see the actual split in action. So it's a really good way of learning as well. You can see your incoming data, your outgoing data from each step, and you can see the updates taking place. And as you can see in this particular fields, when they've gone green, it means that there's actually incoming data that's come through from previous steps that is able to give you a little preview of what it's going to look like. And then if we take it one step further and say, well, hypothetically speaking, we do want to change these fields, and I want to say it now to I'll just call it. So I want to fix up this the computer names, but at the same time, I actually want to update a date field in it. So, for example, we have an expiration date field for each one of these assets. We want to be able to update it, and this update may actually be forking into a third or a different node or a different function, which may be doing lookups. It may be doing a warranty fetch information from the vendor via API calls. So grab its serial number. For example, for each computer, we do have a serial number coming through. There you go, service tag. So maybe you want to be able to work with that service tag, look it up, grab the date, and then actually update it in your Hudu. And then subsequently update the asset with it. So in this particular case, I've expanded this workflow to also include, so this is a JavaScript code node. So you can use, if you don't have a particular node or connector that has needed functionality, you can, and you're familiar with either Python or JavaScript, you can code one up. So in this particular case, all this is just a random date generator, which will give me within a certain range from the current date, it will give me a random date. So as you can see, this particular generator will return that random date, which was 7th of Feb 2026. And what I now want to do is I will actually, not only do I want to update the asset name, but I actually want to update the expiration date. So in this particular case, I'll flick it to expiration, to expression, and I'll drag the full date field, so with a full timestamp and so on and so forth, into here. So this will render it for me. Save it, and what I'll do is I'll just execute the entire workflow. And then what you'll see is you'll see this column starting to get populated. There you go, 20 done. And there you go. So all of the computer names have been renamed and the expiration's been updated. that particular workflow.
That's pretty awesome. And I definitely think the drag and drop into the expressions is a pretty underrated feature. If you're not quite sure how to write that expression, drag and drop in, and it definitely helps you.
Yeah,
And so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the expression piece, I do encourage as people start working with a little bit more with N8N, do some research into, or sort of reading into those expressions. They are extremely powerful, and noting that a lot of them are actually so they'll do validation for you, as well as so quite often they will. So as an example, they give you helpers. So suggested. So for example, suggested content, or you can write if statements and date timestamps and so forth, or just references to your names, to like say the earlier node names, to be able to pull data from them. So there's a lot of, you don't necessarily need to be have a memory of an elephant to as you work through your workflows.
Yeah, one of the coolest things about N8N, in my opinion, is they've definitely thought through all of this and made it pretty much as easy as they possibly can to do some pretty advanced things.
Indeed.
So Max, just confirming, the loop, you built the loop in because you are doing two things. You're doing both editing the asset name as well as then editing or adding an expiration date. If you weren't doing both, say just editing the name, they could forego the entire loop, just build out that simple workflow, probably 3 steps, manual,
Correct.
retrieve, update, and they're up and running. But
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, correct. And that's one of the things that you'll find. This for me at least did take a little bit of time to understand when to use loop, when not to use loop, and there's an endless. I'd encourage to look through YouTube or so community resources that people have published where they actually do break down the specific examples: when to loop, when not to loop, when to use other. So other branching. So you may do a filtering, you may do an if. It was various. And I say switch is also a common one that I use quite often. So operations. So so definitely encourage people to to read up and sort of look through the available community resources on it.
Yeah,
Just
makes sense.
on the subject of community resources, one thing that I didn't, that will be worthwhile mentioning is the N8N YouTube channel. They're quite active on it, and so as an example of a quick start guide, so this is a 10-15 minute video that works through the necessary components of the moving parts in a little bit more detail. And in this particular case, Max does talk through the in a little bit more detail about the areas of N8N workflow that I think is going to be essential for for individuals who are just getting started with it. So we'll share the link to the video into the comments.
Great call out. Yeah. And they also, in their guides, they have some basic workflows, just getting started, build those out. They take you step by step building those, kind of using the data. So yeah, all of that'll be linked in the description, so you can check it out and kind of run through some of those intro ones. And then, hopefully hop into the Hudu community intro one that Max just covered.
Indeed, yeah. So just on the templates, they do have so another way of getting going with getting an understanding or practical use cases is the N8N templates, so workflow templates, and there's also third-party community, other websites that also publish them, and those are incredibly powerful in being able to, say, pick up a workflow and pull it into your N8N instance. So in this particular N8N workflows, all of these, this is just simple JavaScript. You can literally pick this up, right click, copy to clipboard, create a new workflow, and then Control V, paste. Here's my workflow. So I've replicated all of the nodes, all of the configuration, hit save, and now I've duplicated my workflow. Alternatively, you can utilize, pull some of these templates, and you can, explore it, or you can pull it straight into your, copy it to your clipboard as an example from here. I'll just delete all of it, Control V, and here's that template that's available in this, here's this particular example of a template that I've just pasted in, and all I need to do is configure it up with necessary credentials. So in this, so connect it to a AI model and a few other bits and pieces, and you have your full workflow mapped out. So it's very, very easy. And then you just break it up into individual components and see, oh, why did they do it? Why did they sequence it in this particular way? And it's a really, really practical way of learning how to best structure individual workflows.
Yeah, that's a great call out, and just kind of expanding on that, Hudu or community.hudu.com, we're starting to get some N8N workflows populated in that site. And so being able to import those in, you can take them, like we mentioned earlier, the credentials are not saved. So that's really all you have to do is input your own credentials, save your own API keys for, the Hudu related ones or whichever service you're using, import those in, and you're off to a pretty dang good start with that workflow. Awesome. Thanks, Max. I believe that's a wrap on part one. Hopefully this gives everybody a solid foundation for how Hudu and N8N can work together to reduce manual work and hopefully improve documentation workflows. In part two, we're going to take it a step further and explore some more advanced use cases, covering practical demonstrations and advanced tips and troubleshooting. So if you're ready to go deeper, we'll see you over there.